Okay, so this is the final part of the walkthrough for the Datagrid view. What we're going to do in this part is just basically raise an event in the edit employee form and the add employee form so that it can notify its parent, form 1, the form with the data grid on it, so that these forms can notify the parent form to say something has changed. So we have our edit employee form, which just looks like this, and then when someone clicks on the save button, what we want to do is trigger an event to notify the parent that this data has changed. So what we'll have to do is look at the code behind the edit employee, and what we look at first is how we can create the structure such that this notification can occur. So in order to do this, we have to create an event, and an event and a delegate are closely related. So to create an event, you have to have a delegate in place first. There are different types of delegates that can exist, and the delegate effectively is the means of transport between the edit employee form and the form 1 form. So we're going to define our own delegate here. You could use the event handler delegate if you wanted to, but it comes with its own signature. So the signature we want to create here is, this is the signature on the method. The signature we want to create is that it has a void return type and that it accepts in an employee record. So looking at the delegate, we have public delegate void employee update, and then in the parameter list we have an employee data type called EMP. So what the delegate does is just basically set out the structure in which a method can subscribe to this particular event. After that, what we do is we create an event, and the data type of the event is the data type that we just defined in our delegate, which is employee update, and then we can give our event a name. So in this case I'm calling it on employee update. So the delegate here, when you're creating it, you can name this anything you want. So the employee update, you can name that anything you want. You can decide what return type you want. Usually it's going to be a void return type, and then you can select which parameters you want to pass down. In this case we just want to pass down the employee record that has changed on the edit employee form. The next thing we did was create the event, and so the event, the keyword event needs to be used. The data type of the event is going to be the data type we just described in the delegate, so that's employee update. So these two things are closely related, they are the same thing. And then we have the name of the event. So in this case I've just picked a name called on employee update, but again you can call that what you want. And what this means now is that when someone creates an instance of edit employee, they can subscribe to the event on employee update. So we look at that in a few minutes when we're looking at form 1. But effectively what it means is they can associate a method defined in their Windows form with this particular event. So that's setting up the edit employee event called on employee update. The next thing we want to do is for the save button. So we have a button on our Windows form, edit employee form. We have a button on it, and so when someone clicks on that button, what we want to do is basically trigger the event we've just defined. So here we have the btn save click event, the method associated with that click event, and what we're doing is creating an instance of employee, extracting out the employee from the user control, saving it against that variable we've just created up above, and then raising the on employee update event. So on employee update is our event, and then our delegate dictates that it is a void return type, so there's nothing to the left hand side of that to say assignment, and on the right hand side of it there is the employee, so we need to pass in the employee to the method. So that was dictated by the delegate up here. So we're following this pattern here, which is void return type and accepts in an employee data type. Okay, and so we just raise the event by calling the event and passing in the employee. And finally we just close the Windows form to say that the the task has been completed. So that's the creation of the event and the delegate, and so the next thing we'll need to do is take advantage of that inside of the Windows form. So again, going back into our Windows form, form1.cs, the form that has the data grid view. If we go down to the edit section, what we'll see is we have our edit tool here. So this is the menu click method. So when someone clicks on the edit menu, this is the code that gets triggered. And so previously we have gotten our employee record, then we create an instance of our edit employee form, and now the next new line of code that we have is this line, which is basically we're telling it we want to subscribe to the event that exists on the edit employee form. We want to subscribe to the on employee updated event, and to do that we use the appending operator here. So we're appending in our method because multiple people could have subscribed to this on employee update. So we're subscribing to that, and we're passing in the name, just the name of a method, not the parameter list or the return type, but just the name of the method. So the name in this case is update employee, and so that's a method that has been defined in form1.cs. So let's take a look at that method. So that method is defined here, and again what you notice is that there's certain structures that have to be adhered to. The method has to have a void return type, and it has to accept in an employee data type, and the reason for that is because the delegate said that that's the kind of method that can only subscribe to this event. So we can call this what we want. Update employee is what I've called it, but you could call it something else if you wanted to. But you have to have void as a return type, and you have to have employee parameter coming into it. That's because the delegate has defined such a method signature. So once we have that employee, all we need to do then is basically cycle through our list of employees in our effective database, which is our list field defined up at the top. So we just have to cycle through that list and find where that employee currently exists, and then update that employee. So we're cycling through the employee list, then we check to see each employee to see if their ID corresponds to the employee ID that has just been passed in to this method. If it is the same ID, well then that must be the record we need to update. So then when we update that record, when we find that record, we just update it using this line of code. So we're setting the employee to the item in the list, and then finally, so that the data grid view can be updated, we reset the bindings on the binding source. So resetting the bindings on the binding source basically refreshes the data in the binding source, which triggers a refresh in the data grid view. And false is passed in because we don't have any structural changes to the employee record. It's structurally the same. It still has the same amount of parameters. Or sorry, it still has the same amount of properties. So false is fine for that. If you passed in true, what that would mean is that the structure of employee may have changed. And so basically that's it for the edit employee cycle. It's basically a case that we have our data grid view, we select our data grid view record, so the employee, then we select the menu item edit. When we click on edit, that creates an instance of edit employee. We subscribe to the on employee updated event, and then we finally show the edit employee dialog box. So that will bring up the edit employee window. We pass in our employee that the user has selected in the constructor of edit employee. We pass that data down to the user control. The user control associates that data with the text boxes. When the user makes changes to those text boxes and clicks on save, we read that information back from the user control into the edit employee Windows form. The edit employee Windows form then raises an event called on employee updated. When that gets raised, the code back in form 1 here, this method update employee, gets triggered. That refreshes our database. That triggers the data grid view to be updated, and then we close the edit employee Windows form, and then our Datagrid view has been refreshed and the cycle has been completed. So that's for edit. For add an employee, we need to do something similar. So we need to add in a delegate to say how are we going to notify our parent that something has changed. So when someone clicks on save for the add employee, we'll want to basically notify the parent to say this is a new employee, please add it to the Datagrid view. So we've defined our delegate here. We've called the delegate we call the delegate employee added. It's void return type, and it has a employee being passed in as its parameter. Then we created an event of data type employee added, which is our delegate, and we've named it onEmployee added. So again, you can give it whatever name you want, but I've called it onEmployee added. And so down in the save section for the add employee, we have created our employee, we've pulled that information back from the user control, and then we've basically raised the onEmployee added event. We pass in the employee that has come from the user control, and then we close the add employee Windows form. So when that happens, that will need to be reacted to in the form1.cs. And so in the form1.cs, up at the top here, we've got our add tool strip. So this is the menu item for adding something, adding an employee. So we create an instance of our add employee Windows form. We subscribe to the onEmployee updated. So that's what we're doing in that line. And then we show the dialog. And so when an employee has been added using the add employee form, the event gets raised, and we target the response to that in a method called addEmployee. And so addEmployee is quite simple. The method, it has a void return type because the delegate said to have a void return type, and it has an employee as its parameter list because the delegate said that. We name it whatever we want. addEmployee, this name and this name here have to be the same. Then we add that employee to our list, and we reset our binding list, and then our Datagrid view is refreshed. So that's end to end the code that we covered from step 1 to step 8, captured in videos, so hopefully that will make life a little easier for you all. Again, if there's any questions or issues, just let me know and we can try and address them. Okay, thank you.